The room was chaos. 3 tiny lives on the edge, a doctor fighting the clock, and then the mother whispered the words that changed everything. Comment below. Where in the world are you watching from right now? No worries, I'll deliver the whole 5-part drama now, seamless and continuous. Each part picks up exactly where the previous one ends, with late reveal end of part 4, and a grand earned resolution in part 5. The doors banged open hard enough to rattle the chart rack. Dr. Nathan Hale stepped through, already tugging on gloves, his eyes narrowing against the sharp hospital light. The delivery room was a storm, voices overlapping, monitors screaming in uneven rhythms, the metallic bite of sterilizer thick in the air. A nurse darted past with an armful of warm blankets, nearly colliding with him. BP dropping. Fetal heart rates on 2 and 3 are decelerating. Fast. A resident called over the noise. Nathan didn't answer immediately, his gaze locked on the woman in the bed. Her face was pale under the unforgiving lights, skin damp with sweat that caught in the strands of her dark hair plastered to her temples. Her breaths came ragged, shoulders lifting off the bed with each contraction. But it was her eyes, wide, rimmed red and locked on him, that made something in his chest itch just for a second. He knew her. He didn't let it show. Nathan, she breathed, voice fraying on the edges. Please save them. There were no explanations in that moment, no time to ask how or why. He reached for her hand, not thinking, just grounding her with the solid wrap of his fingers. We will, he said, low and certain. You're not alone. First one's crowning, the nurse barked. Nathan moved to the foot of the bed, the roar of his pulse sinking with the rapid-fire beeps overhead. The smell of amniotic fluid mingled with antiseptic, the heat from the overhead lamps baking his shoulders as he worked. The first baby came small and slippery into his hands. A tiny girl with skin almost translucent. She didn't cry right away, his stomach clenched. Come on, he whispered, rubbing the delicate chest in quick circles. A beat, then a thin wail broke through, shattering the tension. Girl. 4 pounds. Abgas to Niku, he said briskly, passing her to the waiting team. The mother's head fell back for a moment, but she didn't close her eyes. She was watching him, like she couldn't let herself look away. Another contraction ripped through her and she gasped. The sound half a sob. Nathan was there again, anchoring her elbow as he positioned himself for the next. The second baby came with more fight. A boy, face screwed up in defiance before he'd fully cleared the birth canal. His first breath was loud, indignant. Nathan almost smiled. Good set of lungs, he muttered, handing him off. Then came the third, trouble. Cord around the neck, heart rate nosediving on the monitor. The air in the room seemed to tighten, every sound sharpening into glass. Nathan worked quickly, hands sure even as sweat beaded at his hairline. He freed the cord, guided the tiny body out, and for an awful second, there was silence. He pressed the smallest mask over the newborn's face, coaxing breath, willing life. Then a whimper, soft but real. Relief rippled through him, so sharp it felt like pain. All 3 stable for transport, someone called. Only then did he allow himself to look at her again. Her chest was heaving, eyes glistening, but it wasn't just exhaustion in her expression. There was something else, something heavier. She reached for his wrist, fingers slick but insistent. Her grip stopped him mid-step. Nathan, her voice was hoarse, trembling. There's something I have to... Doctor? The charge nurse cut in urgent. Niku needs you for consult. Now, Nathan glanced between them, caught in the pull of her gaze, then forced himself toward the doors. Behind him, her eyes followed, wide and unreadable. He pushed into the corridor, the air cooler quieter, but only barely. Wheels skittered over polished floors. The scent shifted from antiseptic to coffee and latex. He stripped off his gloves as he walked, snapping fresh ones on before he'd cleared the second set of doors into Niku. The Niku felt like a universe inside glass. Soft blue light pooled over isolettes. Machines hummed a low, vigilant chorus. Tiny bodies, impossibly still, were wired to life with leads and tubing that gleamed like spider silk. Triplets, 32 weeks, the Niku fellow said, meeting him at the warmer. Baby A, low birth weight, mild respiratory distress. Baby B, transient tachypnea, baby C, intermittent apnea and probable PDA, murmur consistent with a ductile shunt. Nathan leaned over each child, absorbing details, skin tone, chest rise, the flutter of eyelids, the way baby B's fingers curled like they were holding a secret. A nurse adjusted the tiniest hat on the girl, baby A, and Nathan felt something catch in his throat that had nothing to do with medicine. He shut it down. Focus. Monitor C's oxygen saturation closely. Echo in an hour to confirm the ductus. Start in domethacin if indicated. He smoothed a palm-sized circle on the isolate plastic, a strange gesture, something like a promise. The fellow nodded. And the mother, he swallowed. Stabilize her in recovery. I'll check on her after the echo. But he didn't wait the hour. He lasted 20 minutes. 20 minutes of watching the tap of tiny chests against ventilator support. 20 minutes of hearing her voice in his head. Please, save them. And underneath it, down where he wouldn't look, Nathan. When he stepped back into the postpartum wing, the lights were warmer, calmer. A TV murmured something about a distant storm. He stood outside her curtain a moment, palm hovering over the fabric like he might sense the right words through cotton. Then he went in. She lay turned slightly on her side, hair brushed back and right against her wrist. A nurse was taking vitals, gentle, efficient. You have a visitor, the nurse said, mouth quirking before she slipped out. He drew up the chair but didn't sit. The babies are in NICU. They're fighting, his voice softened. They're beautiful. Her eyes filled, not with panic this time, but with something slower. Can I see them soon? We'll bring you to them as soon as you're steady. She nodded, then winced, hand moving reflexively to the tender ache in her abdomen. I'm okay, she said, the lie mild, almost tender. Silence sat between them, and in it, the past pushed through. He cleared his throat. You said you had to tell me something. She looked at the ceiling. Can we? Not yet. He almost said no. He almost said he deserved. Needed to know why she was here, why her voice knew his name like a prayer and an apology. Instead he said, we'll do it your way. The words surprised him. They felt like stepping into a room he'd once lived in. She shut her eyes. Thank you. He left before the room could tilt into an old ache. Back in the hallway he leaned against the counter, the wood cool under his palms. A familiar voice broke the spell. Dr. Hale? It was Mara, his friend and the NICU charge nurse, her dark curls pinned high, badge lanyard dotted with stickers from grateful families. Echo ready. How's CSATs? Better than I expected. She paused, studying him. You okay? He deflected. Just tired. Mara lifted a brow. Tired doesn't make your hands shake. She glanced toward the postpartum room he'd left. Is she someone you know? He chose a neutral truth. Once got it a beat. The babies are good kids. Stubborn, they'll make you earn the discharge. He found himself smiling. I like stubborn. In the echo room, the screen lit with ghostly grey images of baby C's heart, the chambers fluttering like a moth behind glass. The tiny murmur whispered through the speakers. The PDA flew a bright streak on Doppler. Small, Nathan said, relief easing his shoulders. We'll try meds first. As they wrapped up, Mara's phone buzzed. Mom wants you, she said, frowning at the message. She's anxious, keeps asking for you by name. He didn't ask how Mara's mother, who volunteered in family support, knew the patient. He already suspected. When he returned, the room had shifted. The light from the window had gone amber with late afternoon. She was sitting up now, a cautious triumph, one hand over her gown where her heart hammered. I want to see them, she said. The words tentative, like she was testing how much the world would give. He wheeled her down the corridor himself. The elevator shuddered once, then glided. He could feel the heat of her. He could smell the faint salt of her skin under the antiseptic. Neither of them spoke. The quiet was weighted and raw. In NICU, he paused at each isolette. Ava, she whispered for baby A. Ali, she breathed for the boy. And she faltered at the last. Her hand hovered above the plastic shield of baby C's isolette, fingers trembling. Nora, she said at last, a little laugh in her throat that turned into a sob. She just looks like a Nora. Nathan's chest tightened. They fit. She leaned closer. and there was a tenderness in the way she watched the monitors, the way she matched her breathing to Nora's, a mother's rhythm. The thought landed with a steady ache. He could have stayed there forever, the two of them tilted toward the same fragile universe. But a soft alarm pinged, Ava's sats dipping. Nurses moved with swift calm. The moment fractured. "It's okay," Nathan murmured. "We've got—" As the team adjusted CPAP pressure, he felt her fingers graze his wrist again, small, seeking. He didn't pull away. "After the babies settle," she said, voice thready. "I'll tell you," he nodded, though he wasn't sure he could stand the time that stood between now and then. Mara appeared at his shoulder. "Dr. Hale, we've got a consult in all three." He squeezed the wheelchair's handles. "I'll be back," he told her. Her eyes anchored him. "Nathan, please come back," he went. The doors swung. The NICU lights turned from their soft blue to hard silver as he stepped out. And with the shift, everything he'd been holding back rose like a tide he knew would drown him if he didn't speak soon. As he stripped his gloves later, a text blinked on his phone from an unknown number. "Don't leave her alone." Then, after a beat, another. "You need to know what happened in Chicago." "Don't leave her alone. You need to know what happened in Chicago." The words glared up at him from the screen, stark as a heart rhythm on a flat monitor. The hospital Wi-Fi flickered. Someone laughed 2 halls away and it sounded wrong. Nathan typed back, "Who is this?" No response. Chicago tasted like iron in his mouth. Years since he'd said the city out loud. Years since he'd packed the remnants of a life into boxes and walked away from a woman who had stood in a doorway and said, "We're not built to want the same things," then shut the door on him and the job that made him feel useful. He'd told himself that leaving was self-preservation. He'd told himself lots of things. He pocketed the phone. He had a mother to get back to, and 3 newborns being stubborn about oxygen. The kind of stubborn that meant they wanted to stay. When he returned to Niku, she was alone at the glass, the blue light coating her skin like frost. He watched her shoulders rise and fall, watched her lean forward as if her bones were artillery, and love was a war you fought with your whole body. She sensed him before he spoke. "Ava's numbers look better," she said, glancing at the screen, then at him. "They do. He joined her at the isolette. You named them fast. I've been naming them for months." Her mouth quirked. "I had lists. Far too many lists." She hesitated. "I named the middle one after my grandfather. Elijah. He was quiet, but he could fix anything." "Eli will like that," Nathan said. "He already complains when we move his leads." She laughed softly, then bit it back as if joy might break her. "Was it hard to come here?" he asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Her eyes cut to his. "Yes, you could have gone anywhere. I tried." She stroked a fingertip over the glass where Nora's fist opened and closed. "And then one night a few months ago, I ended up at the ER with a nosebleed that wouldn't stop. The attending was new. He had your eyes." Nathan felt the ground tilt. "So you looked me up." "I told myself I was just confirming the best Niku near me. I told myself a lot of things," she exhaled. "It wasn't about us. It was about them." He nodded, accepting the lie that wanted to be the truth. "Chicago," he said, the words soft and terrible. "Someone texted me." Her shoulders flinched. Of course they did. "Who?" She didn't answer. Instead, she reached for his hand, then stopped, fingers hovering like hummingbirds in winter. "We can't do this here." "Do what history?" Her half-smile hurt. "We're in the present. Look." She tipped her chin toward Nora, who was frowning in miniature. He let it go, for the moment. They spent the next hour in the choreography of Niku life. The measured opening of isolettes, the careful redressing of tiny heads, the warming of pumped colostrum cupped like gold in a nurse's hands. The room smelled faintly of plastic and something sweet like powdered milk. Mara drifted through with jokes threaded to her updates. The respiratory therapist hummed a Sinatra tune under his breath. When the babies settled into their slow lunar sleep, Nathan wheeled her back to her room. In the corridor, the fluorescent lights buzzed, the sound more insect than electricity. The elevator opened and 2 residents spilled out, one whispering, "Is that her?" before the other elbowed him with a look that said, Shut up and respect the sanctum. Inside her room, the afternoon had tilted toward evening. The city outside the high window was a dream of glass. He closed the blinds a little, softening the glare. A jug of water sweated on the tray. He poured a cup, handed it to her. Their fingers brushed, and something semi-forgotten, like summer rain before it breaks, shifted in the air. She set the cup down carefully. "Do you remember the cheap diner on Clark?" she asked. He found himself laughing. "With a neon sign that flickered like it was shorting out. How could I forget? You ordered pie like it was a religion. You ordered coffee at midnight and fell asleep in the booth." Her eyes warmed with the memory, then cooled. "We were stupid, weren't we? We were brave," he said. "We thought love could outstare everything, and then it couldn't." He didn't know what to do with his hands. He wanted to put them somewhere useful, on a chart, on a pump, on the past, to hold it still. "You said we weren't built to want the same things. I also said I was scared." He went still. Her breaths counted themselves. "There's a reason I'm here," she said at last. "A reason that isn't only medical. Chicago is part of it, but not the part everyone thinks." The door clicked as someone knocked and pushed in. Mara's mother, a petite woman with kind eyes and a tote bag full of crocheted hats. "Can I? I can come back." "No," the mother said. "Please, come in." Mara's mother set down the tote, pulled out a tiny grey hat with a ridiculous pom-pom. They always look like little mountaineers in these. She looked between the two of them, reading an unreadable room with a volunteer's omniscient grace. "I brought tea." She set a thermos on the tray. "And I brought the thing you asked for." The mother's breath hitched. "You found it." The older woman nodded and took a sealed envelope from her bag. It was thick, scuffed at the corners, the paper softened by time. She placed it on the blanket near the mother's hand. Nathan looked from the envelope to her. "What is it?" She stared at it, thumb rubbing the corner. "Proof," she murmured. "Or permission." He felt his phone buzz again. Another message from the unknown number. "Don't let her be the only one who carries it." His mouth went dry. "Carries what?" She slid the envelope toward him. "Open it." He hesitated, then broke the seal. Inside were prints, the kind you get from a chain pharmacy kiosk. The first was a photo of her on a summer street, sun in her hair, hand on a belly barely round. She was alone. The second photo was grainy, a picture of a sonogram taped to a fridge. The third was a hospital wristband, a name half visible. His name. He looked up, words gone. Her face was more fragile than he'd ever seen it. "I didn't want to tell you over the phone," she said. "I didn't want to tell you when telling you would have pulled you back into a life you were finally surviving. I didn't want to be the person who turned your healing into a choice." He reached for the bed rail and held it like a thing that could keep him from falling through the floor. "Why now?" "Because I was wrong about what you wanted," she said. "And because there's something else. Something I can't keep out of the light any longer." He stared at the photos again, as if more information might appear in the grey. Behind him, the hospital shifted into night, the distant murmur of shift change, the smell of fresh mopped floors. The world was still moving and he was not. "I have to round," he said, voice rough. "I'll be back." She flinched, then pressed her lips together like she'd expected it. "Okay." He left before his face could betray whatever it was doing. In the hall, he braced a hand against the wall, breath shallow. The envelope burned in his pocket. Chicago was a ghost with fingerprints. And somewhere inside the NICU, 3 tiny hearts beat with a timetable that didn't respect anyone's narrative. He was halfway to the nurse's station when Mara intercepted him. Hey, you look like someone told you the moon's not real." She searched his eyes. "Do you need a minute?" He shook his head because the alternative was unraveling in the middle of the hall. "How's Nora?" "Sleeping like she didn't terrify us 3 hours ago." "Good." He started to move past, then stopped. "If a number keeps texting me about Chicago," Mara made a face. "Block it. It knows things." "So does half this hospital," she said, voice softening. "Good secrets don't stay secret here. Not because anyone's cruel. Because we all live in each other's lives." He exhaled. "Yeah, go back to her," Mara said. Or don't. But don't hover in the doorways. It's worse. He did neither. He took the late-night consult. He checked labs. He signed orders. He went to the NICU and watched Nora's chest rise and fall. He stood in a stairwell and stared at the city lights until they blurred. When he finally returned to her room, the city was a midnight diagram of windows. The corridor had gone quiet in the way. Hospitals only get at 3 in the morning, a quiet full of breath and waiting. Her lamp was on low. She was awake, eyes luminous in the soft light. The envelope lay open on the tray, like a creature that had emptied itself. "I thought you weren't coming back," she said. "I said I would." Her mouth lifted, skeptical and grateful. "I remember when you used to say everything like a contract." He sat. "Chicago," he said. "The word a hinge. Tell me." She took a breath. "There was a night. You were in the oar and your phone was off, and I—" The sentence broke. She started again, slower. "I found out something that scared me. I made a decision without you. I left because staying meant telling you something you couldn't unhear. And I was a coward about letting you choose me and the cost." "What was the cost?" he asked, though the shape of it was already there in the room with them, hovering near the envelope. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back. "If I tell you," she said, voice a whisper, "we don't get to pretend anymore. We're terrible at pretending." She let out a sound that was almost a laugh, almost a sob. "Okay." She met his gaze head-on, the way she always did when it mattered. "I didn't just leave, Nathan. I left because I was." She paused, fear passing like a shadow over her face. "I was pregnant." The word struck the air like a chord. He didn't move. He couldn't. She kept talking, the words tumbling now. "I lost one, early. I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to ask you to hold that grief, when your entire life was holding other people's. So I made myself small. And then when I couldn't be small anymore, He closed his eyes, and for a second the hospital fell away, and there was only the diner on Clark, the late-night pie, the neon sign, the woman across from him who would take the world on the chin and apologize for bleeding. He reached for her hand, and this time he didn't stop. "I should have found you," he said. "I should have—" A soft knock interrupted them. Mara's face appeared serious. "Sorry, I wouldn't. Except, Ava's having more dissats than we like. We're going to intubate." The mother made a sound from somewhere deep. "No. We'll be careful," Mara said. "She's telling us what she needs. We'll listen." Nathan stood steady. "I'll be there." He looked down at the woman in the bed, at the fear and the fight and the apology she wore like a coat. "We finish this," he said. "We finish all of it." And he ran. In the NICU, as the team prepared to intubate, Ava's oxygen plummeted, monitors screaming. Nathan lifted the laryngoscope, and through the glass the mother appeared, one hand flat against the window, lips forming words he couldn't hear. Then, just as the tube cleared the cords, his phone buzzed with a final text. "You already know the truth. Go back and let her say it." The words flared in Nathan's pocket, but he didn't check them again. He was inside the frame that made everything else narrow. Ava's tiny mouth open under the blade, the glow of the light catching pale, perfect structures. "There," he murmured, an incantation to muscles and memory. The tube slid in. The capnography turned gold. The sat number edged up from the red cliff. Secured. The respiratory therapist said, "Tape already down." The room exhaled as one organism. Nathan looked up, heart ricochet. Through the glass, the mother's palm was still pressed against it, the skin ghosted blue by the NICU light. Her shoulders trembled, their eyes found each other and held. "She's stable," he mouthed. The tremble turned to a sob that flattened her for a second. Then she nodded, small and fierce, and lifted 2 fingers from the glass, one for him, one for the baby. He felt like someone had reached into his chest and folded a paper crane from his heart. They watched Ava settle. They hovered over Eli, who liked his oxygen higher, and Nora, who had decided apnea was last hour's fashion. The medical world clicked and whirred and sang, and then the night broke toward morning, a grey seam opening between the city's buildings. Nurses traded jokes like currency. A new coffee smell shouldered the antiseptic. Mara drifted close. "Go," she said to Nathan. Before the daytime parade starts, he hesitated. I go. She raised her brows. I'll call you for the morning echo, he went. Her room caught its own small dawn. The blinds were half open now, the light thin and forgiving. She was awake, like she hadn't slept at all. Her hands were linked over her stomach, pale against the hospital gown. How is she asked before he'd shut the door. Mad at us for the tube, which is good. He sank into the chair, scrubbing a hand over his face. She'll rest. They stared at each other. He could hear the rattle of a food cart in the hall, the squeak of a wheel that needed oil. The world was ordinary and catastrophic at the same time. Finish, he said, voice low. Please. She nodded, swallowed. I didn't tell you in Chicago because I was terrified you'd choose me over the work, and then I'd be the reason you were smaller. I left because I didn't trust you to choose both. That's the ugly truth. She held his gaze, not looking away. But the other truth is that I loved you too much to risk being the kind of story that curdles. He sat very still. The old hurt had sharp teeth. It also had a leash now. And now I know love isn't a subtraction problem, she said. And I know secrets rot everything they touch. She glanced toward the door, toward the Niku wing that pulsed like a second heart in the building. There's one more thing, the thing that brings us to this exact room, this exact morning. He felt it gathering, the way a storm gathers inside a clear day, sudden as a bird's shadow. He reached for the bed rail. He didn't realize he'd gripped it until the metal protested. She closed her eyes, opened them. The choice as she made it moved across her face like a weather system. Nathan, she said, voice clean as a bell. You are the father. The words fell into the room, and everything rearranged itself around them. He didn't speak for a count of 5 breaths, then 5 more, because he had promised himself once that if she ever said those words, he would not let his first reply be anger or doubt, no matter the years between. He stood, but his knees weren't sure. He sat back down like a man who had been carrying weight without knowing, and suddenly understood why he was tired. There, he couldn't finish. The word felt too large and too fragile in his mouth. They're yours, she said. Yours and mine. Her voice collapsed. She brought a shaking hand to her mouth. I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you. I thought I was protecting me. I ended up protecting nothing. He reached across the space and took her hand. It was warm, soft, slick, with the faint sweat of fear and the effort of telling. Say it again, he said. She blinked. What? Say it again. You are the father. His eyes burned hot. He let them. Okay, he whispered. Okay. A knock on the door snapped the moment. A man in an impeccable suit stepped in, flanked by a hospital legal counsel Nathan recognized from fundraisers. The suited man's smile was polite and false. I'm sorry to intrude. Ms. Reyes. I'm here representing the donor. The room tilted. The donor, Nathan repeated. The man adjusted a cufflink. Ms. Reyes used an anonymous donor to conceive. There are complications with consent paperwork. We need to secure preliminary statements. The words didn't track. The world had just anchored, and now it was sliding again. She made a small sound that could have been a laugh in a different life. No, she said quietly. We're not doing this. Mom, it would be best if... No. She sat up straighter, pressing a hand to the ache of her abdomen, as if to remind herself she was made of muscle and will, and not only apology. I didn't use a donor. I used a bad decision, and then I used silence. The lawyer blinked, thrown. Your understanding is wrong. Her voice sharpened. The father is Dr. Hale. Everything froze. The suited man, the very air. Nathan heard his own name like it had been said over a loudspeaker. He had the dim thought that the hospital had cameras and microphones everywhere, that the walls would tell this story before they asked permission. Noted, the lawyer said, tone chilly. He recovered quickly, gathering his papers. We will update the file. Congratulations. He pitched the last word like it was a poisoned candy. He left with the counsel, the door whispering shut behind them. Silence. The kind of silence that had weight. She let out a breath that shook her ribs. I didn't know they were going to come, she whispered. I told them to leave it alone. My OB office must have. She mouthed the curse and then laughed. An exhausted, wild sound, of course. Nothing about this stays inside the lines. Nathan stood abruptly, the chair scraping. He took 2 steps and then stopped, because if he kept moving, he might not stop. He turned back slowly. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I was scared and proud and sorry in equal measure, she said. Which is to say I was human, he exhaled, a sound like surrender. Okay, she blinked. Okay, I don't know where we go from here, he said. I don't know how to forgive all the years I didn't know their names, but I know where I want to be today, he swallowed. With you, with them. She started to cry. He sat on the edge of the bed and let her press her face into his shirt. He smelled salt and hospital laundry detergent, and her shampoo, the same brand she'd used when Chicago was still their city. He held her and thought wildly that if the building cracked under an earthquake, he would still be here, braced in this exact shape. They stayed like that until the power system crackled with the morning shift announcement. He pulled back. Let's go see our kids, she laughed through tears. Our kids, she repeated, like she was teaching herself a new language. They were almost to the NICU when an alarm peeled off. Nora this time, a Brady so sudden the room sliced in 2, before and after. Nurses moved. Nathan's body moved before his mind caught up. Come on, baby, he murmured, fingers at the tiny sternum tapping into rhythm. Come back to us. The monitor numbers stuttered, then climbed in ragged steps. He didn't realize he'd been holding his breath until the room gave it back to him. He looked through the glass. The mother stood outside, hands clasped so tightly the knuckles had gone bloodless. When Nora's heart rate steadied, her knees buckled with relief. Mara slid an arm around her. The older woman, Mara's mother, appeared at her other side, knitting still in her lap, needle tucked into a loop so it wouldn't lose its place. Nathan pressed his palm to the glass. The mother did the same, palm to palm, a pain between them that felt thinner than air. A knock sounded behind him. He turned. The hospital administrator stood with a stack of forms. We need to update the birth certificates, she said gently. Father's name? Nathan opened his mouth, and a code alarm exploded overhead, urgent and unmistakable. Code blue, NICU. Nora's monitor screamed. Nathan ran. He didn't remember telling his legs to move. They did anyway, faster than fear. Faster than the thought that he had just found his children and might now lose one. The room galvanized in a ballet of preparation. Crash cart cracked open. Medications drawn. The world narrowed to Nora's tiny body, and the way her color had drained like someone had turned down the saturation on a screen. Apnea with Brady. Unresponsive to stimulation, the nurse reported, voice steady. We're pushing caffeine. Bag her, Nathan said. Slow, gentle. The respiratory therapist already had the mask in place, hands like a prayer. Nora's chest rose, rose. The monitor teased them, lingering in the low heart rate like a dare. Nathan stared at the numbers as if force of will could move them. Come back, he whispered. Please. The mother was in the doorway before anyone could stop her, braced by Mara. Nora, she said. The name a thread pulled taut between her ribs and the isolette. Nora, sweetheart, listen. We're right here. Something turned. Maybe it was the caffeine, maybe the bagged breaths, maybe her voice. The heart rate hovered, then caught, then climbed like a skittish animal finding the trail again. Sinus, someone breathed. The room let go in increments. Nathan's hands shook. He stepped back, wiping his brow with his sleeve, and for a second his vision filmed. He blinked it clear and looked up to find the mother. No, not just the mother, but the woman who had once held his heart and thought she was saving it by giving it back, staring at him with a gratitude that had heat. Hi, he said, rough. Hi, she answered. The word wrecked and shining. He went to her. They didn't touch, not yet. There were too many eyes, too many boundaries. But their breath met in the space between them and made a weather that belonged only to them. Birth certificates. The administrator prompted softly from the door, contrite at the timing, but practical like people who keep the world's paperwork from crumbling. We can wait, Nathan said. He turned to the woman he loved. The mother of his children, the person whose secrets had detonated and somehow left a path, not a crater. If it's okay with you, she nodded, a small motion that felt like a vow. The administrator took down the names. Ava Reyes Hale, Elijah Reyes Hale, Nora Reyes Hale. She looked up, beautiful. The papers slid away with a quiet finality that felt like a chord resolving. The day widened. The triplets found their fickle rhythms and held them better. Ava, fronted by the tube, stabilized enough to let the ventilator do less work. Eli decided hands were a wonderful invention and tried to tug at his hat. Nora slept a deeper sleep than earlier, surrender threaded with strength. They took turns sitting by each isolette. They learned the rules of touch here. Fingers still, no stroking, pressure gentle, always watch the numbers. They learned each child's small geography, where a foot liked to rest, how a shoulder relaxed, which lullaby the heart monitors chose to harmonize with. They learned that sometimes the grandest love is not loud but relentless. Between rounds they stole time in the family room. The couch sagged in the middle. The coffee was both burned and cold. There was a mural painted by a volunteer that tried and failed to make clouds look like animals. He watched her fold a blanket into a square with the care of someone who needed the corners to touch. Chicago wasn't all bad, she said unexpectedly, not looking at him. There were good years. There were, he agreed. We were good, we were brave, she said, echoing him from before. A smile ghosted. Maybe we still are. He reached across the table and touched her wrist, a cliff edge of a gesture. Can we be brave differently now? She looked at his hand, then at him. What does that mean? It means I want to show up. Every day, for them, for you, if you'll let me. No grand gestures. Just the unglamorous miracle of staying. Her throat worked, and when it gets hard, we don't run, he said. We say the thing, even when it's the worst thing. He took a breath, especially then. She closed her eyes, a ripple moving across her face. When she opened them, answer lived there. Okay. He smiled, small and true. Okay, a week in Niku time is an Ira. The triplets proved who they were. Ava, fiercely opinionated about ventilator settings, fond of the sound of Nathan's voice reading anything, chart notes, cereal boxes, consent forms. Eli, the peacemaker, heart rate steadying when his siblings fussed, fingers always reaching. Nora, a fighter in disguise, the one whose Brady episodes scared everyone and then receded like a tide at last. One night, near the end of week 2, when Nora had finally gone 48 hours without a scare, Nathan found the mother asleep in a chair between isolettes, hand in through the porthole to rest in Nora's palm. He put a blanket over her shoulders. He stood there a long time, reading the rise and fall of her breath like the safest story. Mara glided up, silent in her sneakers. You look happy, she whispered. I am afraid, he murmured back, and I am happy. Good, she said, satisfied. That's how you know it's real. He watched his children sleep. He watched the woman he loved mend from the inside out. He realized that Chicago lived in them, not only as a city that broke, but as a city that built the muscles for this. He was grateful and angry and full. He let it be complicated. Discharge day approached like a holiday crowds didn't know about. There were car seat tests and feeding logs and lectures about RSV. There were gifts from nurses, a crocheted octopus for each baby, tentacles to grasp instead of tubes. There was a poster Mara's mother made with handprints the size of thumbprints, names curled under like signatures in a secret book. On the morning the discharge papers were ready for the first 2. Ava and Eli. Rain brushed the city in silver threads. Nathan strapped Ava into her car seat with a care he reserved for sutures. The mother buckled Eli, murmuring a promise about windows and trees, and the way sunlight feels like laughter on skin. Nora wasn't far behind. She watched the proceedings from her isolette with frank disapproval, as if she knew she had been the dramatic one and now resented the paperwork catching up. When all 3 were finally ready, when the nurses had hugged them, and the respiratory therapist had pretended he didn't cry, and Mara had said, text me pictures, or I'll show up at your house, They stood at the hospital's sliding doors and breathed the air beyond. The rain had stopped. The asphalt smelled like relief. The world was bigger than the NICU blue light, but they carried that light with them, the way people carry a hymn after the choir finishes. At home, her home, for now, they moved like pilgrims. They learned the rhythm of 3 at once, the double swaddle, the bottle warmers that sang like strange birds. Night was an animal they tamed with teamwork and laughter, and an occasional weeping that was no one's fault. Sometimes, when the babies slept all at once, they sat on the floor, backs against the couch, knees touching. They didn't talk about everything. They let some truths ripen. One late evening, the city a hush outside the windows, he said, "I'm sorry for the years I didn't know them." The sentence landed as a small stone in a pond, rings moving out into the past. "I'm sorry for not letting you," she said. "I thought I was protecting us. I was protecting theory. We have time." She looked at the bassinet, at 3 tiny faces turned toward a future that didn't care about Chicago or hospital hallways or text messages from ghosts. "We do," she said, surprised. "We actually do." He reached for her hand. "Marry me," he said softly, the words so simple and outrageous that the air held its breath. Her eyes widened, then filled. "Are you asking because of them?" "Yes," he said, and no. "Because of them I know what forever looks like." She laughed, one hand to her mouth, the other hard in his. "I don't have a dress, I have hospital scrubs." He said, "We'll be a theme." She tipped her head back and let the laugh finish. "Okay," she whispered. The kind you don't unsay." Yes, they didn't rush it. They did it the way they did everything now, one small step after another. Papers, appointments, rings chosen fast and right in a shop that smelled like polish and old wood. A ceremony in a courtyard, a few months later, when the babies were sturdy enough to attend. Mara held vows in a trembling hand that had steadied 1,000 infants. Mara's mother cried into a handkerchief that had seen generations. The triplets slept through their parents' vows because babies are rude about timing. The city played its orchestra around them. Sirens in the distance, a bus breaking like a sigh, someone laughing on the next block. The sun pooled gold over brick. "Repeat after me," the officiant said, and they did. But sometimes they didn't repeat. Sometimes they added, because there were things every vow should include. "I will say the darkest thing out loud. I will let you see me scared. I will choose staying when leaving looks easier. I will hold the babies at 3 a.m. and not keep score." "You may kiss," the officiant said, beaming. They did. The world did not explode. It didn't need to. It leaned instead, as if to listen to the sound their hearts made when they touched. Later, when guests had spilled into the street and the babies had been admired into exhaustion, Nathan stood with his wife at the edge of the courtyard. The triplets snuffled in their stroller, 3 small sons. The hospital sat a few blocks away, a landmark of their private geography. He touched her cheek. "We made it here," he said. "We did," she answered, "and we get to keep making it." A breeze lifted a curl from Nora's forehead. Eli stretched and gripped Ava's blanket like a secret pact. The city went on, so did they. That night, home again, he fed Ava while she fed Nora, and Eli dozed with the expression of a man who had solved the central problem of living. They were quiet for a long time, companioned by the white noise machine pretending to be rain. "Do you ever think about the text messages?" she asked. He frowned. "Sometimes. Do you know who sent them?" He nodded slowly. "I think it was your nurse," he said. "The one who kept sending paperwork. She thought she was helping." She sighed. "People meddle. Sometimes it saves us," he said, then smiled. "Sometimes it just annoys us. Both can be true." He lifted Ava to his shoulder and patted her back in the rhythm the NICU had taught him. She burped like a lady. He kissed her hair and then kissed the woman he loved, his wife, the mother of his children, the person who had given him a truth late but still in time. Outside, a siren wailed and faded. Somewhere, a neon sign flickered on a street that belonged to a different chapter. Inside, the living room glowed with lamplight and bottle gloss and the slow sweetness of exhaustion. The house smelled faintly of soap and milk and the orange blossoms. She kept in a little glass on the table, because she thought hope should have a smell. He traced a finger over Nora's palm, watched it close around him with the absolute faith of a new creature. "Hi," he whispered. "I'm here." He looked up. She was watching him. Eyes are soft, astonished, dark. "You are," she said. He nodded, the motion small and seismic. "I am," and they were here together, inside the life that had taken the long way to find them, holding what the night had almost taken, and morning had given back. The triplets shifted in sleep, the sound like a page turning. They turned the page with them.